There is something strangely revealing about train journeys. You board with your luggage, your reservations, your carefully arranged identity, and then you are seated beside strangers. Maybe a stranger who knows nothing about you and therefore has no reason to admire you or fear you or tolerate you. But sometimes that stranger sees you more clearly in those few hours of the train journey than most people do in years. The story I am going to narrate is not a love story. It is a story about two people who almost dismissed each other and then decided not to. Let's start with the beginning. Ananya Mehta boarded the evening train to Jaipur with the quiet determination of someone who prefers silence over small talk. Ananya had chosen the window seat deliberately because looking outside often discouraged conversations. She checked her ticket, seat 26. Perfect! Ananya arranged her bag, took out her book, and settled in. A few moments later, a man stopped beside her seat. He checked his ticket and said politely, "Excuse me, I believe seat 27 is mine." His voice was calm, measured, not loud or hesitant. Ananya moved her bag slightly without looking at him and replied, "Yes, this is 27. He placed his luggage above, sat down beside her, and after a brief pause said, "Good evening, I am Arjun Malhotra." She closed her book halfway and answered, "Okay." He said, "And what's your name?" She said, "Is it essential?" After a pause, she said, "Okay, I'm Ananya." Arjun could notice the distance, and instead of retreating, he said gently, "Long journey ahead. I suppose we should at least know each other in case one of us requires assistance." But Ananya looked at Arjun properly now and replied, "That seems unnecessarily dramatic for a train ride." He smiled slightly and replied, "I prefer preparedness over awkward silence." But she said, "I prefer silence." "Ah," Arjun replied, "then I must try not to disappoint you." Ananya decided within the very first 5 minutes that this boy Arjun was overly confident. He decided within those few minutes that Ananya was determined to appear unaffected. But let me tell you, both were slightly wrong. Let's move the story to the first clash. An hour into the train journey, this train had settled into its rhythm, and the evening light had begun to soften. Arjun glanced at the book in Ananya's hands and said, "I think you're holding that book upside down." Ananya looked at the book immediately, and it was indeed upside down. She corrected it and said without embarrassment, "I was thinking, not reading." He replied, "That explains the intensity in you." She turned towards him. "Do you often comment on strangers' reading habits on train journeys like such?" He replied, "Only when they appear deeply engaged in invisible texts." There was no mockery in his tone, just observation. Still, Ananya felt challenged and said, "You must enjoy forming quick conclusions about people, right?" "I do," he admitted, "though I am aware they are often inaccurate." "And yet you continue to form them?" she asked. "Yes," he said, "because sometimes the revision is more interesting than the assumption." She paused because that answer unsettled her slightly, not because it was offensive, but because it was thoughtful. Let's move as the conversation deepens between Ananya and Arjun. Tea arrived, paper cups were handed over. Arjun took his and said, "Do you travel frequently for work?" Ananya responded, "I travel only when necessary." "That sounds disciplined," he said. "That sounds private," she corrected. Fair. Ananya now asked, "And you? Do you speak this much to everyone who sit beside?" "No," Arjun said honestly. only to those who seem determined not to speak at all. She raised an eyebrow. So this is a challenge? Not at all, he replied. It is just curiosity. And why should I entertain your curiosity? She asked. You should not, he said calmly, unless you find mine as inconvenient as I find your guardedness. Now let's move on to as honesty moves without confession. As the sky outside darkened, the train compartment grew quieter. Arjun said, May I ask something without offending you? You may try, Ananya replied. Why do you assume that confidence equals arrogance? She did not answer immediately. She asked him instead, Why do you assume reserve equals fear? He leaned back slightly. Touché. She softened just a little. It is not fear, she said finally. It is habit. He replied to this, and habits are rarely accidental. You speak as though you understand people easily. I don't, he said. I simply listen. And what have you heard tonight? She asked. I hear someone who does not enjoy being underestimated. And she said, I hear someone who is used to being taken at face value. He nodded once and said, That is accurate. And for the first time, there was no defensiveness in either of them, only recognition of two human beings trying to build a conversation. And now let's come to the last phase of this story, which is the arrival of the train. Morning light began to filter into the compartment as Jaipur approached. Announcements echoed faintly. Passengers began gathering their belongings. Arjun picked up his bag and said, This appears that our debate has reached its final station. Ananya said, Yes, fortunately for both of us. He smiled. I'm not entirely certain that it was unfortunate. She studied him carefully and replied, You're still very confident. No, he corrected her gently. I'm simply less certain than when I boarded. That surprised her again. In what way? I assumed you were uninterested in conversation, but I was wrong. You were simply selective. She nodded and said, And I assumed you enjoyed hearing yourself speak. I was also wrong. You enjoy being understood. The train slowed, doors opened, noise filled the air. They stepped onto the platform. For a brief moment, they stood facing each other among strangers. And Arjun said, Most train conversations end here. Yes. But not all of them have to, he said. Ananya asked, And what do you suggest? I would suggest, he said carefully, that instead of deciding what we think of each other tonight, we allow the possibility that we may both be incomplete impressions. She considered that without any drama or flirtation, just sincerity. And after a pause, Ananya reached into her bag, tore her page from her notebook, wrote something on that page and handed it to Arjun. This is not an invitation, she said clearly. It is an opportunity to continue revising your conclusions. And he accepted it. Wow! What did you learn from this story? Not every connection must become or begin a romance. Sometimes the most powerful beginning is simply this, that two people choosing not to dismiss each other too quickly. But the truth is, we are all unfinished sentences. And sometimes the right person does not complete you. He just asks you to continue. Yes? How did you like this story? And have you ever had conversations like these with strangers, with acquaintances over a train journey? If yes, please continue. Please tell me downstairs. For more stories, listen to Tell a Tale with Heena. Bye.